Hello and welcome to We Had Movies, and I'm your host Mohammed Yagi, or Mo Yagi as I like to call myself, or just Mo. Mo works. And our other host,
Eric Leon.
of course. And Eric, how are you feeling today?
Well, not too bad. It's been a while, hasn't it? But I
Yeah,
think we're ready to get back to this.
yeah. Everybody kind of got like just destroyed by the winter this year. The winter just came really hard in
We uh,
February.
we had a really
Yeah,
re it was a bit of a later winter. I wasn't expecting this kind of intense weather.
yeah. This time of the
Beginning of a
year.
late mid-February to late February, early March. But I mean,
Yeah,
it looks like we're on the downswing of things. It looks like it's
it's getting better, but
hopefully
yeah, yeah.
getting
Hopefully,
better. Fingers
yeah.
crossed.
Fingers
But
crossed.
we'll have to see.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as February goes, it's been pretty slow as a month, and because of that, we hadn't taken a lot of time to watch movies. But this time around, we did. We finally caught around to watching Malcolm X. So yeah, here's the episode about Malcolm X, the movie that was in what was it, 95 or
92.
92? Wow, 92 even. Wow.
Yep.
So yeah, I remember watching this movie when I was younger with my father and not quite understanding all the politics that was going around in the film at the
Mhm.
time. Um, Interesting enough, like I did kind of learn some history from it, I feel like, because there's some things that came up and then I was like, oh, yeah, that's where I got that from, or that's where I remember that information from.
Right.
And so there is some history in there, but the thing is he doesn't really put dates or anything in there. Spike Lee, I think that was the artistic expression of the filmmaking. And then it had a very Spike Lee feeling. I mean, the camera shots, certain
Absolutely.
angles. There was like the at the end when Malcolm is about to meet his basically his doom. They you have this shot of him just kind of like freeze frame, and then there's the background moving, and that's a very
Yep.
classic like Spike Lee take on camera work, or like he uses like sort of like artistic approaches like that. So yeah, a very noticeable Spike Lee film, but at the same time, of course, another thing that would be noticeable about Spike Lee film is that Spike Lee himself decided to be in the film. So,
Yep. That's the first
and
thing. That's the first thing I noticed when I mean, obviously outside of Denzel, but that's definitely the first thing I noticed. Like, hey, Spike was in this as well.
yeah, and just to say, like, it was, I'm sure it was so much fun for him to do this sort of expose, or I guess it was a biopic on Malcolm X, and I'm sure it was so much fun for him to do it, and I'm sure he probably wanted the role of Malcolm X. I'm sure that's probably how he saw himself. But no, I think it was a great choice that it was Denzel Washington. Of course, this movie, I mean, it definitely helped with his career as well. I mean, did an excellent job. There's like some amazing acting in that, or just like performance, just great performance in general. But like, he fit the role so well. It was just like you can almost imagine him being the same person. It was really well
Well, and
done.
I think this is something that happens often with biopics, and I mean, just there, it's always been a very popular
Hmm.
um, movie. I think, especially in the last 20 years, we've seen a lot of our very prominent people come out. Just looking at um, more standout ones is, I mean, look at Timothy Chalamet right now with um, Bob Dylan, but
Right?
even Jamie Foxx playing what's his name?
Jamie
The
Foxx playing, yeah, Ray Charles.
Ray
Yeah, he
Charles.
did.
That's a
He
perfect
did.
example. I mean,
Yeah.
you always get really standout performances from these biopics, and more often than not, you see actors being nominated for Academy Awards. I mean, Denzel lost the award for this one, um, but he was nominated. I think for a lot of people, it kind of put him on the map for
Oh
some
yeah,
like really
big
amazing
time,
acting, right? A lot of
big
people
time.
say that it still is like his best performance
Best
um,
performance, yeah, by
to
far.
date, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I was ever to see Denzel Washington, I'd be like Malcolm X. I don't think the
Right?
Enforcer. I don't think Enforcer. I don't think, I mean, maybe I think He Got Game. That was another excellent performance by Denzel Washington. But
Isn't that also a Spike Lee movie?
was that also Spike Lee? Probably. Oh, yes, of course it was. Yeah,
I
and
think it
it was
was. I think it
shot. It
was.
is very much shot the same. Yeah, way. Yeah, so it's definitely yeah. And then when the mom's screaming Jesus from the window, and she's calling for her son, and everybody thinks she's crazy. Yeah, that was funny. Um, yeah, no, I mean, anyway, going back to the film, the biopic itself, um, is so well performed and so well done that it's difficult to talk about it in a fun way, I would say. So,
Well, I
um,
mean, it's very. This is a very different movie than what we've traditionally done, right?
yes,
We've done
exactly.
fiction, we've done things that are more like maybe things that are less likely to
Yeah,
happen. But
and I mean,
this is
there is
based on a
some
real person, and
fictionalized. Yeah, like there is some of
absolutely.
the
I mean,
film. Yeah.
like any biopic, I think you see in order to engage with your audience, they take a lot of creative liberties
Hmm.
with that. And this was no this movie was no different, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
There, even though my understanding was is that um, Spike did want to take that authenticity was like a really big thing for him. And they even shot a lot of scenes in the actual places where certain things happened, even in the
Wow.
exact same ballroom where Malcolm X was assassinated. They shot that scene where he was assassinated. So
Whoa. That's
it's yeah,
crazy.
it's attention to that kind of detail that I think also Spike Lee is known for, right? It
Wow,
really
that's some historical information that's like also important to me just in general. Like the relevance now of that scene is so much more impactful.
and it kind of makes me think. I mean, I did a little bit of digging after watching the movie, and I found that out, and it just made me think. Well, what other scenes in the movie were there where they actually took place? You know, like was that really
Hmm.
that scene where they march down to the police station? Was that really that police station where they did that? You know, like just small
Right.
things like that.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of those scenes actually what you're talking about where they marched all in a row. That was I think sometime in the 1950s, 1957, probably late like 1950s. And it happened where it he definitely made it more magical than it was at the time. Like
Mhm.
I'm sure there were there was a crowd and there were people and all that, but definitely the scene he took and made there just it showed you it kind of like if I was a black man or an African American, I should say I would be very proud in that moment, right? Because it would be like you've never seen that where like just everybody straight faced in like basically uniform, just standing in a line and not moving, and that's enough to be like intimidating to the New York police, right? To say like
Absolutely.
get this guy to the hospital, and they didn't have to do it with violence, which was really incredible. And I
No, and I
think
think go ahead.
and I think that's where he was creating this scene to like try to give that feeling, that impact, and you can almost feel like the room goes silent if you were sitting with a group of people like okay this is
For
a
sure.
very important moment,
I mean,
like
it's very telling that even at the end of that scene, the police chief even says, you know, that man has too much power,
too
right?
much power, right?
That
Yeah.
right. It's very much something that he commanded in that moment. Is he commanded? It wasn't power over people, but
No.
he inspired these people to the extent that they were willing to follow him wherever
And
it
I
took
think
them, wherever he took them,
yes,
right?
right. And then secretly you kind of hear the conspiracy voice of Spike Lee, I'm kind of one of those people who are on the board with the conspiracy, but like the real enemy here is the white man, right? Like so Like, and,
Well, if
and I
there's
mean
any
that's
takeaway that I got for the good part of this
from
movie, it's
movie is
that.
exactly right. It's that Spike Lee thing where he very much makes white people look very bad, and all of them are conspiring against black people, and I don't think it's like that necessarily. I think there's a lot of people who live in ignorance of the racism, and what they do is they play in the roles of being racist, but they don't really know what they're doing. You know
Well,
what I mean?
and
Like they
that's you're
most
very
people
right.
play, like most people just play a role and they don't really know what politics are behind what they're saying or what they're doing.
And,
And
that happens when it's something that's been ingrained in your society for so long.
exactly.
When you've got something that's been part of your society for 200 years, and you don't really give it a second thought if it's not something you really question,
Right.
right? It isn't
And
until you start
so
questioning something like that that you
so
actually start thinking about it, right?
yeah, exactly. And so with that being said, it's like, it's exactly why Spike Lee, would want to take his films and do that extreme, because we've only heard the other extreme and somebody had to tell the story from a different perspective. And I think this is one of those films that really did that. Um, uh, we didn't really go through like a summary because I don't know if how we would give it justice, because it's not like a fictional tale that was made up. It was a lot of history put together in pieces, a lot of momentous occasions where, I mean, out of all the negative things that happened, okay, so let's start with like the beginning. So you have Malcolm X, who actually was named Malcolm Little, and they show him in maybe during the 1930s to 1940s.
40s.
Yeah,
Yep.
like in the later years, the wars, and basically being a black man in America in Harlem, right? And so he grows up
Hmm.
around certain people, life of crime, because he was taken away from his mother at a very young age, which we learned later on in the film. And then we also learned that his father was also murdered by a bunch of white supremacists. And then, like, they killed him and put him in front of a train so that there was not even evidence that there was a murder.
Yep.
So they couldn't even get any help. It's like life insurance from that, which is insane to me, the story there. And it's a very saddening story once you know the story of Malcolm Little, right? Like that person had a horrible life, just like the worst of it. And then on top of
Hmm.
that, raised in maybe you think, oh, it would get easier once he's raised in a household with other children, and it's like, no, these parents are teaching him that he's also always going to be different. His teacher is telling him that he's always going to be different. There's no way that you're going to ever be a president or a lawyer or a whatever your dream is going to
Right.
be.
Why don't you think about being a carpenter, right?
Right,
That's a good job
exactly.
for you.
Exactly. And so these sort of things, these images that are shown constantly throughout the film are just to show you that this person didn't just become a black supremacist out of nowhere. It wasn't like he took on this role of just this like faction that is very negative, because he loved negative things. No, no, no. He came from a very dark place in the world, and then learned through love, and instead of self-interest and preservation, he learned through love that there could be like pride for in yourself, and then also have a pride for your community and have a pride for your
Mhm.
people. And so this kind of thing is what he was trying to teach to a lot of people, is like, be proud of being black and like stop listening to what white people are telling you, because anything that they've told you so far hasn't helped. It's only been a lie, right? And so it's it's so hard to talk about this without getting into the racial fighting. But I'm not saying that this is my belief, by the way, just to put that on record. This is what's happening in the film, right? So you have very strong antagonist feelings of white people already against black people and generationally, and then you have black people, of course, all of a sudden learning that they should be hating what they've been living. relearning, I should say, because there's been always a renaissance or reborn, factionalism that happens. Like George Floyd
Yep.
was our most recent attack that woke everybody up again. And it's like, okay, racism still exists. We still have to deal with this. So at that time, Malcolm X was the thing, and Malcolm X was somebody who, and it's kind of like become like a joke, this kind of storyline, because it's like it's now like a normal thing that a black man goes to jail in the United States and then comes
Right.
out a Muslim, and then because that's but I mean that they could also come out being Christian or Baptist or whatever it is, but it's just like the impression that we got for a long time because of Malcolm X and because of the Nation of Islam is that people would go into jail and then come out Muslim, right? And in the
Exactly.
United States, and it's because I mean that's where you could teach them. You're already at your lowest of low. This is where you would collect people to be, to change their lives and then become better people, right? Better versions of themselves.
Mhm.
And so, with that intention, I'm sure that's usually the general intention, but with every single cult, and like what happens in this film and during while it progresses, is the Nation of Islam becomes more and more obvious as not representing a religion, but more so representing a narration of a real existing religion, but told through the story of one man who symbolizes himself as the prophet reborn, and then he'll be the last
Exactly.
time to be. Now, this is stuff that is actually like if I knowing from my own background. And my parents raised me Muslim, so I know that there is a little bit of like that story in Islam where there would be a return of the prophet or something like that. I think that's just stories. I'm not 100% sure, but it could be cultural. But the idea is that this person took that very popular story from, Muslim culture and
Mhm.
the return of the prophet and then made himself a prophet and then like built this whole um basically it's no different than Scientology, to be honest. Like if you look at Nation of Islam now, it's like basically the same thing. It's just you gather people, and then the more people that they get into the group makes more money for everyone in general, and then everybody kind of like, you know what I mean, it becomes a cult. It becomes
Mm.
like a system of control. And um and that wasn't the intention of Malcolm X. Of course, Malcolm X was more interested in telling the truth about how to free Black people in America, and actually to first just be recognized as being valued, or valuable in America. So, um, even if like the intention, like I don't know, how do you feel about it? Like the intentions that he had to make things better for his people, was it? I don't
Well, I
know.
think what happened was is that I mean it took him a long time to get to where he was by the end, right? Like it
Right.
took everything he went through as a petty criminal, the exaggerated prison sentence he was given for burglary,
Right.
and then his introduction to that version of Islam. Like it's um, talking about how the original man was black while the European man was still in caves, right? Like there's obviously um, a
Yeah.
certain racial superiority happening there that I don't know necessarily lines up with Islam itself, but
No. No.
uh,
Well, it
is
depends again on which Islam you're talking about. So when you're talking about Nation of Islam, it's definitely a group. It's its own separate group organization, I would call
right.
it, or an institution. But it's not. I mean, it's just as large as any other church. in the United States anyway. It's definitely got a lot of followers still to this day. And then it's not to say that anything that they're following is wrong. It's just their version
Mm,
of the truth. And I think that the film does a good job of showing that as well.
absolutely. And I
Um,
think what happened was is that he was a strict adherent to the Nation of Islam because of everything that it did for him. You know, it very much transformed his life and who he was.
and that's what you're supposed to catch on exactly. Like when he gets out of jail and he's now a better person because of that's what it is that it's not that people go in and they come out Muslim because it's a trick that they decide to play into. No, it's most likely somebody who's so down on their luck, has never seen anybody be so proud to be a black man, or to be a man in general. Like to be able to have a person who's a man in general to be in front of you and show you like you can just be proud in yourself.
Well,
Like
exactly. There's a lot of
that would motivate you to join any group, really. Like if it wasn't for, I guess they made it Brother Baines who plays out this whole role of him knowing him from the jail to the time he gets out, and I'm
yeah.
not sure how accurate that is to history, but I'm sure there is a Baines or something like that and some
Someone
connection.
had to introduce him to that and had to,
Yeah,
explain everything to him. And I think there was a lot of appeal with the the kind of uh, purity that came with being part of the Nation of Islam. You know, like
yeah,
he doesn't drink alcohol. He doesn't uh, do drugs. He doesn't. I mean, there's a lot of things that he didn't do, and almost as a way to maintain the mind, the body, and the soul. And I think that is
right.
something that
And then he
that
did something that was
that
also
Malcolm
traditionally
very much
Muslim.
wanted or needed in his life
Yeah,
after everything that had happened to him up until that point. So, I mean, it's very easy to see how someone would be drawn in
yeah,
by all of that when, like you said, someone who's been so hard down on their luck that you're at a rock bottom and the only place you can go is up, right?
yeah. I think what was kind of interesting too is that they ended it with like Nelson Mandela, the whole film, with Nelson Mandela, and he's teaching like a class in probably South Africa, or he's just standing in front of a class, and he does this whole thing where he's explaining what Malcolm X really means. And I think that's really how the whole film sums itself up. It really is with that scene because it wasn't just the fact like the thing is that in his death in 1965, he basically, it wasn't just like he stood up there and like, you know, he came in guns blazing or something like it wasn't a no, he understood that he was going to die anyway saying the things he was going to say, and at this point he's already decided like I have to speak out against this organization because they're threatening my life, but also like I don't know, it was interesting the whole
Well, it
the
seemed like he came to the realization that level of black radicalism, that level of extremism was
yeah.
ultimately going to be more detrimental to society
Well, I
than
think what
anything
really gave it
else.
off, and that's they show that in the film as well, was that the Elijah Muhammad character, who's basically their prophet, he basically was accused of sexual assault on two different women or something like that. Got or at least got them both
Right.
pregnant and then doesn't taking care of them or
Well,
whatever.
it wasn't just that though. They
They
felt
were
that
young.
he was gaining too much power within
Yeah,
the Nation of Islam, and that he would take over for him. You know, there was that constant belief that he wanted to take over and that he was interested in power when in fact that didn't really seem like it at all. He wanted to continue spreading the message, I mean, at least I didn't get the sense that he was interested in power or taking over the Nation of Islam in any way.
no,
But
no, and I
obviously,
mean again,
other parties within
that's
the
the
group felt
way.
that way, and that's why they
Yeah,
squeezed him out, right?
right. And I mean, that's the way the Spike Lee direction made it look, right? So we don't really know what happened during, like, in those conversations, other than apparently some CIA were recorded some of the stuff on the phones, and there's some like some stuff that might have been
Well, I
recorded
mean,
in
it's
history.
not it's well known that at the time, like black activists, not just Malcolm X, but also Martin Luther King, were being actively watched by
Well,
the
yeah,
FBI
FBI
and
is yeah,
other organizations that had a vested interest in ensuring that black people did not organize,
yep,
right?
yeah.
Um,
So again, this is why it was such an important character in history because I mean, you needed whatever he left behind, even though a lot of it is Nation of Islam. I mean, he did try to start his own mosque and his own group of people, his own Muslim. I think I forget what they were called, but I don't know if they're any better. I don't know how they work, but the organizations that they left behind weren't just the necessarily just the thing that Malcolm X left behind. Malcolm X, as a character on his own, was such an inspiring person that he left behind a message. And a lot of the stuff that he was saying, even though people now could look back at the things he was saying and say that could be hypocritical or it could be like radical or whatever, he was saying things that made sense too. So that, and I think that's the problem is like there is a lot of truth and a lot of things that people starting to realize that the government didn't want them to realize, right? Because then you have organized groups like what happened, basically, right?
exactly,
And
exactly,
so,
and that's the last thing
so,
the government wanted them to do is to organize. I mean, they
and I
had
think
enough problems
Spike
as it
Lee,
was.
yeah, as a director, did a good job of presenting that in the film and making sure that you understand that it wasn't just radicalism. It was basically what Black Lives Matter is now. I mean, really, it's just like at the time, Malcolm X was just driving the story home that maybe we matter too, but it at some point it became we matter more than the white person or the white American. And I
Exactly, and
mean, but I mean again, what the thing is that Spike Lee fights you in this film is like what's so threatening about that though, because you've been doing that the whole, like, you have white supremacists who are spouting
mm,
radical racism. So how come you can't have a black radical person doing the same thing? Like, and so it's like there's a little bit of a debate there that you could even have where it's like almost like, and I think at one point he says it when he talks about JFK, and it's interesting that he's the only one who had like a negative thing to say about JFK, which apparently also cost the that probably pissed off the Nation of Islam at the time. But he said that the chickens come home to roost, and basically it's like you've been starting all these wars, and now that you're like, oh, let's stop them, and well,
mm,
too late, they're gonna come. It's gonna come back and bite you in the ass. So you've already started this thing that was gonna end up with you being murdered, and it's funny that he has that point in time and they show that because at the end he gets also killed, and I guess the chickens come home to roost. And is it justice? I mean, it's not justice. Obviously, it doesn't feel like justice to us, but maybe to the person who committed the crime, I guess.
I mean, whether or not it was committed by the Nation of Islam
Yeah,
or some other entity. I mean, at the end of the day, it, what they really did was they created a martyr in Malcolm X,
yeah,
right?
and
Uh,
I think that's the thing, and I
uh,
think in the end, Malcolm X won in the sense that he becomes the greater
well,
um
he becomes this
this
immortal
yeah
figure, right? Like
yes, exactly,
I
exactly.
mean, I mean, we're watching a movie about it. We
Yeah.
watched a movie about him. We're having this discussion. So, I mean, that in and of itself says a lot. Um, but
But
I mean,
yeah,
it's one of the big things is that it seemed like parts when he did that shift to including everyone in his movement, it seemed to have a lot to do when um, he decided to do to do one of the what is it, 4 pillars, 7 pillars of Islam, where they have to go to
Right.
Mecca. Like
Right.
he
So
actually
he
visited
decides
Mecca,
to
and
do the pilgrimage. Yeah. So the pilgrimage was the thing that
exactly.
was the eye opener because, yeah, I mean, at that point you couldn't hide from the fact that there's a lot of white Muslims.
Well,
And yeah,
and something that the movie didn't explain. I mean, it touched on his visit to Mecca, to Saudi
yeah,
Arabia, to just being there, and all the communications between his wife, and how that wasn't an eye-opening experience. I mean, I felt like what they seemed to gloss over was just, it wasn't just Saudi Arabia or the Middle East that he went to, but he also visited Africa, and it his presence there and going to Africa really allowed him to associate himself with a lot of movements in Africa at the time, which again became very important for African liberation. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that they seemed to gloss over just the fact
that
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 he
part of the
that he also,
history. Yeah, like the movie goes on
exactly,
for
yeah.
so long and then it just kind of like it just like goes through like the essential years of his like the real Malcolm X, the one that goes to the UN and like says, hey, Americans are being still mistreated. This is the Malcolm X that we all know and love, right? Not the earlier years. And I think
Hmm.
I think you're right. I think it almost skips that part very quickly and gets to the end. But I think it's because the most momentous speeches that he had were during his younger years. And even like the Plymouth Rock speech, right? Where it's like
Hmm.
we didn't land on Plymouth Rock landed on us, right? And so that whole conversation still to me resonates in a way. Let me stop. So yeah, it was his presence in the time, and not just the presence, but like also the the commitment. And I think it's in his words that were used very specifically. And I think I don't know how true it is that he read the entire dictionary, but I mean he had a lot of time in jail. So like if he did, like reading as much as I could from the dictionary. And I can't tell you
Well,
if I remember every single word for that.
I thought it was a really interesting
um,
exercise in just, in education and just broadening one's knowledge and understanding, right? Because he really,
yeah,
it wasn't just about reading the dictionary, it was about reading between the line and
right.
between the meaning of words, right? And what those words meant in the
Oh
context
yeah, yeah.
of
No, when he was showing
a
him the black and
book
white.
with all the words, but that came
Yeah,
with it. Exactly. Like it just seemed like it was more than just reading the dictionary. It's like he really wanted him to just observe the context and the subtext behind everything.
right. Right. So I mean, a part of like that whole journey that Spike Lee is showing us is that, and if this is the case, I mean, he read all these books and he read a lot and he studied a lot to be able to like speak out the way he has been speaking in general in front of millions of people. I mean, he was an advocate for his people, and that's the thing. Like at the end of the day, if you were to think like he wanted to be a lawyer, he became a lawyer, more or less. Just more about freedom of speech, and he
Right.
had and he had good ideas. Like I said, I mean, I don't know if I would say good ideas, but they're not irrational because, like, for me, for example, I've always had a hard time understanding, and I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, America, but like, how could you call yourself an American or be proud to be what is American when America's only ever been shitty to you, right? Like, if they, based on what they
Yeah.
show, like the history that Malcolm X grew up with, he's only ever been through the system. He's only ever seen his dad be murdered, his mom be left to be in the insane asylum. Like, just the worst kind of darkness that you could think of, and and then you say, well, be proud to be American and join the army or whatever, right? And it's like,
Right.
but how would I, as an African American, have that idea? I could never. it would be very hard for me to believe that, and that's, now we have a lot of other signs that we've seen since then, people taking a knee in football and sort of that sort of
Well,
thing.
and I think a
And
big part of that idea
yeah.
with America is to be proud to be American is its concept of freedom and how much freedom ties into this America as an American ideal. And I think what we
Mhm.
have to realize, and I think what a lot of people fail to realize or fail to remember is that like
That
African
dream only
Americans haven't
belonged
had a lot of freedom,
No, that
right?
that dream only
That
belonged
the
to the
American
to a
dream
certain
only
specific
belongs
group of
to
people.
real Americans.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's not just Black Americans, but it applies to anybody that doesn't doesn't fit within a certain group in America that
Yeah.
applies to, and then everyone else is what gets screwed. So I think
Exactly.
it's part of it was just being fed up with that idea, with that lie, I guess you could say.
Yep, being fed up with the lie. And I think that would have been my biggest motivation to see somebody just, and I think that whole like thing that Spike Lee does at the beginning, obviously that's what he's going with the burning flag, and then it's just an X left behind. This
Yep,
concept that like Malcolm X was kind of a dangerous thing for government, because the government wants everybody to believe everything is a happy place in the United States, so everybody gets along and everybody to, because they want to keep their power, right, their control. But the reality that he breaks there could have basically broken a lot of control and a lot of trust, and so that's why he had to
exactly.
be
He was a
he
danger
was
to the status quo,
and so, correct
right?
me if I'm wrong, but like the assassination, there is conspiracy that it wasn't nationally the Nation of Islam that killed him. It was probably the CIA or something like that. Um,
It was somebody that it was the government that killed
the
him. Yes,
government killed
I have
him.
heard a lot of I have
Yeah,
heard conspiracy theories to that effect. The same thing goes for um, what's his name, uh, Malcolm, uh, Dr. King,
yeah. Martin Luther
uh,
King. Martin Luther King. Yeah,
Martin Luther King.
Jr.
Yeah, but yeah, the same idea. And again, it was because of the message, the idea of organizing Black people in a way that it was it was creating a sort of power that they hadn't really seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that they were extremely uncomfortable with because, again, it challenged the status quo. It challenged existing hierarchical structures. And again, not something that they were going to reckon with. And I
Yeah,
mean, they don't even want to reckon with that right now. So
and that's the thing. That's why bringing up this film right now during the month, Black History Month, and just like the concept to me is that um it's important to remember there is, and there still is a cause in the United States, and there's still a struggle between the races when it comes to where you live or where you come from and how successful you can be, or what success looks like. So, I mean, I could say that generationally we're going to see that kind of go away. I hope so for the future, but I've seen a lot of also negative in the sense that there's still a lot of open people, or people who are not open to either other ideologies or other ways of looking at the world, or you know what I mean. It's just there's a lot of uneducated people, unfortunately.
and
um
unfortunately, the only path to liberation is through education, right? I mean,
yeah.
you can only liberate a population by educating it first and
Hmm.
then moving forward. And a big problem is that a lot of
Yeah,
people are
it's getting
suddenly
harder. It's getting harder to, because also communication's getting harder. Where people get their news is very different now.
mhm. Where they get their news, how they get their
How they get
news.
their news, and
Um,
so it's everything is controlled almost to a point where you don't even know anymore if you have any kind of control over your politics at home, or if you have any control over anything that happens when the elections come, or or even if it matters who you vote for. So yeah, it's a very
Yeah,
difficult
absolutely.
conversation to have after watching this type of film. But like,
Yeah, I mean, it definitely,
that's the kind of conversation that the film flares up for sure. So
absolutely. And I
definitely.
mean, with everything that's been happening in the last couple of years, and even now, I know the
Hmm.
U.S. has gone through a very heated election, and I mean, it looks like, I mean, we're having an election here in Ontario this week,
Yeah.
and we're probably looking at another one in the spring federally. So these are a lot of topics that come up every so often, especially around election times when
Hmm.
people's passionate opinions about certain topics flare up, and you do see a lot of backlash to certain concepts. Uh, inclusion being one of them. So
Yeah.
for a movie like this, I mean, I thought it brought up a lot of important issues, things that I think it was important to remember that. I mean, this movie was done in 1992, and I'm watching it now in 2025, and a lot of these problems are literally the same things that I'm seeing in the news
Yeah, and putting
happening
aside the
one week to
political
another.
side of it, like it's a film that
Yeah.
was filmed in 1992 or like back in the 90s, but like honestly, it feels like a film that could have been done now. Like it feels
Yeah.
no the way that it was done, like the way that this film is done stylistically, cinematography, the just and the fact that it's based on a history, a biopic. They
The
did they didn't they
combination
didn't have to
of
invent any of
using
the set, right? So
no, no,
because
no, exactly.
it just made it such a like a beautiful film to watch, really.
And it also
Even though
the
yeah, I was just gonna say like even though it's kind of like heart like there are a lot of heart-wrenching scenes in this film because like things don't always go right in people's biopic stories, and this one really shows you how things can go from like a positive to a very negative very quickly. And
Mhm.
um there yeah, but putting that aside, it's just like it's so well done in storytelling that even though it is quite a long film, um it gives you everything you need from this, like as far as like a history lesson, without really telling you the dates, and like just giving you the importance, the emotional importance and the value of this person. So like you
I
have
like
the
the usage.
yeah, sorry, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say I like the usage of the all of the archival footage.
Hmm.
Um,
The archival footage is
whether
well
it
done,
was
yeah.
whether it was a protest, an actual protest, or it was footage of Klansmen like in their hoods and like riding horses or whatever. Like it seemed to have archival footage of like every single stage in
Hmm.
Malcolm's life, um,
And also
up
thinking like
until
this
including the
wasn't that
archival
long ago.
footage.
Like that's the
Yeah,
other scary thing, that we have that sort of footage means it wasn't that long ago. You know what I mean?
no,
Like
exactly.
it it
I don't know if
happened
you caught
within
this, but at the beginning of the movie, they actually
yeah,
included footage of the Rodney King beating,
right.
which had just happened,
Right. At the beginning
right? Because
that
that's
that was
1992, and this
yeah.
happened. I believe Rodney King was in 91, so
Hmm.
it would have just happened. It would have been super fresh in people's minds,
Hmm.
and same with the LA riots, I guess. And yeah, this movie comes out, so I think it renewed a lot of interest in his life. Um, I will
Hmm.
say this: this is a piece of trivia, um, and I think you'll appreciate this, Mo. There is a on the album by Ghostface Killer. There's a
Okay.
on Supreme Clientele, which is one of my favorite albums.
Yeah.
There's a song called Malcolm that is about Malcolm X, and it actually
Okay.
uses a couple of samples from the movie. So
Oh,
check
there
it
you
out.
go. There you go. I gotta check that out. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, yeah, there's not much else I could say to talk about this film because
You could
if
do a whole
you could try
podcast
to
series
dissect,
on this.
yeah, you could try
You
to
know, like
dissect this for a week, but in general, like what I was going to say is just like this film um is worth watching again.
absolutely
Definitely
timeless.
something timeless film. Something that also, if you just wanted to see what Denzel Washington, why we all think he's such a great actor, that's a good film to watch. Um, yeah, I mean, other than that, I like Spike Lee films. I like to go back and watch them every now and then, and they all have a similar tone though, where it's like there's a very negative sphere. There's a lot of I would say like anti-white racism in there. But
There definitely is a certain
yeah, uh,
tone to each film that he
yeah,
does.
yeah. He has a bone.
Constantly.
He has a bone to pick with society, and he does it well within his films, and within his right too. I mean, like I said, like these aren't trivial things that Malcolm X was fighting. Right? These were
Well,
real.
and
These were
to
real
speak
problems,
to
and
speak on
people
that
were.
point,
Yeah.
actually, Warner Brothers, they didn't want to fund his whole vision of what he wanted to do with the Malcolm X movie. So he actually had to go to a bunch of black celebrities like Oprah Winfrey, Prince, Michael Jordan to help
Wow.
privately fund the rest of the movie.
Wow.
So that speaks for itself, I feel like.
Yeah, that does say a lot. Yeah. And in the end, I mean, I like the ending where it's just like I am Malcolm X, so that's how a good way to end it too. So
Yep.
we are Malcolm X. No, but I mean like the word that he spread in the end, which it's funny again, like you said, they trivialized it the a little bit, but like it was the end point of his life in the 60s where Malcolm X really became important in the limelight to a lot of people because that's where he rediscovered himself. He does the pilgrimage, he comes back to America, and he decides to speak out against the Nation of Islam, but also speak out against about like still have his voice saying like I still think that black people should be unified under some sort of
Mhm.
flag and have their own you know basically he's a separatist. Like we here have Quebecers or separatists. Like that's basically what he's asking for. Is he's asking for distinct society. That they're recognized for being a distinct society within the United States, and that black people also get the advantages that white people get in society and can do whatever they want. They can build their own companies. They can be lawyers. They can do whatever. And I think that's an important thing for human history. I think it's an important thing for humans in general to learn. And it would have been interesting to see if he had lived long enough, if he had any power in the UN to make any of these changes that were so needed in the Americas.
Mhm.
Because now we're seeing all the effects of what happened after we lost him. We lost Martin Luther King Jr. and JFK and the people who were speaking out against racism um, all ended up killed in the process. So I mean, I don't know. Is it a conspiracy?
Well,
It's
I
hard.
mean, it's I
It's
don't
hard
think
to
it's
see.
I don't think it's a conspiracy to say that anybody who's spoken out against special interests has always ended up in someone's sights or as a target for somebody else. You know,
Yeah,
I think that's throughout history that's always been the case, whether you were just a lowly peasant speaking out against a king or whether you're
yeah,
a college student speaking out against your your government funding genocide.
yeah. But
You
yeah,
know.
so this film definitely did the good job of like taking that, like you're saying, that focus and saying, yeah, at the end of the day, you know, this we want to remember him for the things that he did speak up about, which is like fairness
Mhm.
for equality, fairness for black people, justice for black people in the sense that like they've only ever been treated as slaves, but they should be treated as equals. They should be treated better than equals in some cases, of course. But because they've done more, to be honest, for the country than
Right.
what they deserve. Yeah. So and so like yeah, just to be it's something else to say I want to be proud of being a distinct society within a government that never really cared for me. And I think that's what they've been going through in the United States. And I think the same thing happens with the Hispanics as well, in the US as well, in California and stuff like that, where people who are distinct, they're Spanish speakers from history. They've lived always in California, but they're considered American, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just like, yeah, there's all kinds of groups like that, and grassroots projects are very interesting to me. And I think this is one of those films that would be an interest to you if you value those sort of things. And yeah, and then you can kind of get a general idea of his importance and his value, I think, because like I said,
Absolutely.
it doesn't hide anything. It doesn't hide the negative things that Malcolm Little had done,
Nope.
to get to the point where he got to become like this opposite personality, where he's just open hearted, open minded, and a thoughtful individual. So yeah, quite the journey of a person, a journey of history, and I think it brings out something in everybody, and you'll sort of feel like, maybe the journey for everybody, for myself, should have some equal value, or and then maybe uplift you in some way. So yeah, anything else,
All right.
my friend?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the music.
All right.
Give me that in the city cheer. Turn around in my whip, itty bitty, looking pretty chill. Put my shades on, you ain't even seen it yet. Man, I'm so fresh, and you know I'm always spelling cheer. Give me what you want, what you got, cause I never get enough. You ask me how I want it, and you say you want a chance on me. Chances are you don't know how to do this shit respectfully. I say it like it rough, cause I need a man protecting me. I ain't say this shit for later. I said, baby, come and get it. Feels taking over if you let him. I'ma take the paper, I'ma roll it up, and later he might do what he wanted, cause I let him. Give me something that I'm never gonna forget, because baby, I'm the only one you gotta impress. I won't take any more, and I won't take any less. I'm the queen in this, you know I got the finesse. Give me that, give me that, give me that. Give me that feeling. Bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. Like when we were young. Like when we were young. Like when we were young.
Bring it back, yeah, just bring it back. Sitting in the back, yeah, I'm rolling up some Trinidad. Feeling like the bestest, always got the best shit. Come around, baby, yeah, you knowin' who the best is. And I just bought a record, so y'all don't get it twisted. I ain't talking cheese, even though I'm buzzing, listen. You don't wanna miss it when you get the feeling. It'll make you feel explicit like a new addiction, baby, it'll take a hold. I know you're feeling cold, cause I've been feeling cool. You give me all these feelings that I used to have in school. These butterflies got me feeling high, like I'm floating through the air, hanging out like a satellite. Yeah, it's really got me feeling right. All around me, yeah, looking like a ceiling light. Hanging out with a hella glow. See me from the center of the earth with no telescope.
Give me that.